Welcome to Charts Today Energy. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Monday, the 26th of November, comes to you from London. And we start just by looking at the macro picture. We're seeing crude is up this morning, most of the energy mix down. But just taking a look, first of all, the dollar is down a little bit this morning, but still strong on all three time frames with these new upside targets 1.4, 1.3, and 4.8%. That one not yet activated, but dollar strength is still really the issue there, and euro still looking weak relative to the dollar, and dollar looking strong against the Japanese yen, which is where we normally get a bit of a heads up that the dollar is about to have another push. And we're seeing sterling fairly mixed on the Brexit deal and against the euro down slightly, so no big reaction to that market, not really taking much notice of that. And against the Swiss franc, we see sterling relatively flat as well. US markets were down on Friday. Apple, Facebook, lots of shares falling quite heavily. We're seeing the futures up very strongly this morning. So the NASDAQ mini future up 1.6%. So sentiment is improving there. European markets up. Gold also just maintaining its bullish position, so quite interesting there. Taking a look at crude oil, first of all, Brent crude dived last week. We see that big weekly candle. Remembering this is my long term, my medium term, and my short term picture here, and so we're seeing just a really bearish picture of that long term, because this is the time of year when crude oil tends to fall very heavily if it is going to fall, and so we shouldn't be too surprised. The seasonality tells us that, and we normally go into a strong Q1, but no question that we're in bearish territory on the medium and long term charts. The correlation with the dollar is negative on both, so we see that there. We are potentially just finding some support here on the point and figure chart. This 60 target was given at the beginning of October. That's obviously been met, and so that's a bearish confirmation. 58.57 was the target that we had last week, and that was met on the 60-minute chart. So you really can't ignore these targets. Looking at the short term this morning, we actually moved higher. We've had a bit of a seesaw. If we look at the 1 minute chart, if you're trading crude, this is the chart to watch. We still do have this target of 57.10. That's another 5% lower hanging over us, and the upside potential is fairly limited. So at the moment, we're still favoring the downside. Looking at WTI, here we see a similar picture. Long term, we just may be finding some support on the cloud on the weekly chart, but short term, we're pretty bearish. Not quite a nice rise this morning, hasn't pulled back as much as Brent. And if we look at the downside targets, all been given and met, we've got further downside targets. So it is still a concern that crude will go lower. US NatGas, really big moves here over the last couple of weeks, and we've settled back to 409, so $4.09, but really toppy. We see here we had a massive week the week before last. Last week ended up a bit of a seesaw and ended lower on the week, and we open lower today. So we see here we're gradually climbing, but this chart has really gone haywire, and it's very hard to call. 395 was given at 3:30 on Friday. That's kind of where we're going at the moment. So just watch these 1 minute charts for the price action. Heating oil, as you'd expect, similar as crude and RBOB, we're seeing here does have a little bit of upside potential. Coal prices in Europe, this is API2. This data coming from Thomson Reuters Icon. If you're on the Trayport screen, you'll have slightly better visibility. Down 1.65%. So we are seeing quite key moves here. $81, $82 are the targets on the 60-minute chart. So we do have these targets in play, and that's really where we're going. Looking at the 1 minute chart, which is the shorter term chart, of course, we have 82.20, which was given back on 13th of November and now roughly met. $80.80 and $81.50 are the new targets. Again, if you're looking at Trayport data, you might have slightly different targets there. Emissions down this morning 2.5%. So interestingly, we were recovering a little bit on that long-term chart, but still bearish medium term. Short term, we are finding some support. We've fallen away this morning, having held up on Friday. We're falling away this morning, and at the moment we've got a downside target 18.18, upside potential to 20.33 if we can move higher. Just keep an eye on that 1 minute chart if you're trading emissions. MBP front month down 3% this morning, so been hit quite hard there. Looking very toppy on this chart. We had that fall away at the start of the year last year and then rose, so we may be just needing to find some support here. In the medium term, we're just on the cloud. Short term, looking at the 1 minute chart, we do have downside target $60.60. Again, if you're looking at Trayport data, you might have slightly different targets. And TTF, much the same picture, of course. We're seeing the fall away there, and we're down 2.3% this morning. NCG last week was also just held up a bit, but we've got downside target here of 3.6%, and Italian gas PSV also lower. German power this morning down just under 0.6%. We see here on the 23rd we kind of rose and then fell away towards the end of the day. That crude oil price is having a really big impact on the market. 49.10 is the target on the 1 minute chart at the moment, so that's another 5% lower. That's what we're looking to right now. And if you look at Nordic power, much the same picture as well. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.